Hello everyone, welcome. Recently there have been a lot of talk about add-ons and mods for Final Fantasy XIV as well as other MMOs. It seems to be a controversial topic, mostly due to a particular add-on or mod known as cactbot. Most add-ons and mods are harmless as they either make things easier to see for the player or just add a quality of life to the game that it may not have yet. Cactbot, on the other hand, can easily be seen as a cheating tool. It gives the player information that makes content easier or at times trivial to complete. I won't be showing any add-ons or mods for obvious reasons. I don't use mods anyway, I'd have to go and find them and download them, and I don't feel that is necessary. As the title of this video suggests, personally I do not think Final Fantasy XIV needs add-ons or mods. First up, let's talk about G-Shade, Reshade, or any other color altering mods. These mods might help a player who is colorblind with 14. I myself am not colorblind, and even in P3 Savage, I don't have too hard of a time recognizing all the orange and red. As these mods may help players who are colorblind, the game has some colorblind settings to help separate colors for those players. It may not be the best as stated by other content creators who have also talked about this, but the game does try. I've talked with a couple players that feel these mods make the game's colors more real or generally better. That's like painting an orange a different shade of orange and claiming that that's the correct color for the fruit. But what? So again, I myself am not colorblind, and personally I think the colors in the game were what they were intended to be. Final Fantasy XIV looks great without them. I'll admit these mods don't really do anything outside of aesthetics, and other players are not affected by players using them. As such, I just don't think they're necessary to enjoy the game. Next on the list are UI altering mods. These mods affect the UI by making things bigger, smaller, adding information that isn't normally there, changing the look of certain UI elements such as the party list, or changing the color of names and nameplates. This is a wide category as there are many UI elements we can toy with. I do not know what add-ons these are. The ones I do know of are some that I've seen on Twitch and YouTube. Most of them reflect add-ons you can find being used in World of Warcraft. Some make the UI look like a heavily modded Warcraft UI. Because I do not know what mods do what, I'm just going to talk about the changes I noticed in others' UI. Let's start with changing the names and nameplates. I have only seen this once, and it was for enemy nameplates. It just made the hit point bar thicker, and honestly it looked like a WoW mod. Personally, I don't think this was needed. In my opinion, it looked dumb anyway. If they downloaded this mod to show hit point percentages, values, or buffs and debuffs, well, the game has percentages built into the UI, as well as buffs and debuffs. We may not have values for how much hit points an enemy has, but do you really need to know that if you can see the percentage left? Speaking of buffs and debuffs, recently there have been a lot of people being banned for mods that either show more buffs or show recast timers for buffs on other players. Showing other players' recast timers is, in my opinion, not relevant to you as a player. You do not need to know when the warrior's vengeance is coming up, when the Astro in your group can use neutral sect, or if the ninja's mug is ready. If you are not playing that job, then you are not in control of those abilities and when they are used. If you want to be, then play that job. I know raid alignment is important and satisfying. In your static or raid group, use a voice app such as Discord and simply ask if they are ready for a burst window. Honestly, you don't even need to do that, just use a macro, KEKW. In a pug, good luck getting everyone on board. If you really need to know when they have used Mug, Battle Litany, or any other buff, just check the buff and debuff bar on the mob or yourself. I'll just add this here. I mentioned Discord. Don't be silly. This is not an add-on or a mod for Final Fantasy XIV. This is simply a communication app. Don't be dumb. That brings me to another mod I've seen. Changing the debuff and buff bar for yourself or enemies. This one can actually be done in-game using the HUD layout. If you are having a hard time seeing what buffs you have or the time left on each buff, mainly because they are small, you can increase the size of that UI element. I've heard some players address this, arguing they don't want their UI to be at 200% just so they can see their buffs better. Well, as I said, you can change that specific UI element in the HUD layout. You do not need to increase your entire UI just for one. Final Fantasy XIV's UI is extremely customizable. You can split your status effects into 3 or even 4 groups depending on what you are trying to see. All 4 of these status or buffs and debuff groups can be increased in size separately from each other. You can also prioritize your own buffs to be at the front of the list or separate other players' buffs given to you to a separate group altogether. This video isn't meant to be a guide, so I'll stop there, but that is by far not the extent you could go with customizing your UI with the built-in Final Fantasy XIV HUD layout menu. That was a sentence. You can change pretty much any UI element in the game by size and location on screen. Another mod I have seen is changing the party list to resemble that of a modded WoW party list. This is unnecessary. Since I brought it up, let me elaborate. In World of Warcraft, a lot of players use a mod to change the look of the party list. The main reason for this is so they can more easily identify each class, move, and resize the party list to their personal preference. In Final Fantasy XIV, the player list has a lot of options. Again, this video is not a guide for UI settings, so I'll just list what you can do with it. You can move, resize, reorder jobs, both by role and by your role. You can reorder them manually. You can show up to 10 status effects for each player, or as little as 5 effects. And if you really wanted to, you could just hide the party list altogether. As far as recognizing each job in the list, their job symbol is literally next to their name and is color-coded for what role that job is. There is a built-in threat meter on each player's job symbol. In my opinion, the party list has it all, really. There is another meter players are known to use. I believe it's called ACT, A-C-T, or to be blunt, Active Combat Tracker. I've never used this add-on. Anyway, this tool is not really important. Most of the jobs rotations in the game are straightforward and intuitive if you ask me. You can be good enough to clear most content without knowing your own DPS. The only reason I see anyone using this is to see if they are hitting buttons in the same order as another player that is doing the rotation correctly and hitting the same amount of damage in the same amount of time as they are. In other words, checking their DPS. This can be used to harass other players for not hitting the buttons in specific orders to hit the same numbers in the same amount of time as the other players in the party, which is why it's taboo. This is also why Final Fantasy XIV does not and will not have a damage meter built into the UI. This add-on does not make the game easier at all. If anything, it makes the game harder. Final Fantasy XIV's UI in general, as stated before, is extremely customizable. Lastly, I want to talk about the mod or add-on that I feel is the reason for this recent crackdown on mods and such. CactBot. CactBot, in my opinion, is a cheat tool. Its sole purpose is to relay information to the player to give them an upper hand on the difficulty of content, and not just an upper hand on content either, but on other players who do not have or use CactBot. For those who may not know, CactBot reads game code to relay what players call triggers that let the player know what mechanic is coming up. This is significant and detrimental to the game's difficulty and growth. Most of the content's difficulty that is considered endgame relies on the player being able to react and remember mechanics. If you have an add-on that is telling you what is about to happen, you are ready for it. You do not need to react. And if it is telling you what is about to happen, you do not need to remember if that is happening or not because, well, you're going to be told before it happens. The knowledge of such an add-on or mod may affect how developers create fights moving forward. Final Fantasy XIV already has telegraphs and visual aids in fights to let you know or help you decipher how to handle mechanics. With an add-on that tells you what is about to happen, those visual aids may be removed from future fights. They may start adding heavy RNG aspects to mechanics. Sound familiar? An add-on like CactBot, in my opinion, is toxic and should be seen as cheating. I want to tell you guys a story of my first experience with CactBot. For this first raid tier in Endwalker, I joined a static group. The group consisted of players who have never cleared, it was considered mid-core, everyone had their pre-raid bis, and as far as I knew, we were following popular Party Finder strats. Our raid leader was doing callouts. I didn't realize it at first, but they were doing callouts from day 1, first pull. We had all watched Ms. Tech, Mr. Happy, and the Easy Peasy Guide and a few other guides, so I just thought that's where the knowledge was coming from. Then one day during P2S Prague, the raid leader mentioned in the Discord we should all get Cactbot. It's an amazing tool, they said. This was the first I had heard about it. I didn't know what it was. I have been playing for years without it, so I figured I didn't need it, as I have for most add-ons. Then the following week, one of my raid members messed up a mechanic and said they read the thing wrong. The next week after that, in P3S, our raid leader was calling out experimental fire plume, saying things like, "This will be out," or "This is the ring around the rosy one." I was kind of concerned, like, how do you know what one is happening? We haven't seen the balls yet. Then it hit me. That is what Cactbot is. They mentioned it a few times, giving very subtle hints as to what Cactbot is, but it was that moment I knew exactly what it was. I'll admit them using it didn't really hinder my ability to learn and remember mechanics. After a while, a raid member's callouts are just a cushion anyway. Fun fact, that team didn't last long. We went 6 weeks and never made it past P3S ad phase. Not to sound staunch or anything, but like, I'm above it. I'm above Cactbot. I'm a great player. I don't need any add-ons or mods to play Final Fantasy XIV. I've never understood why players feel the need to mod games. This branches out into other heavily modded games such as Minecraft or Skyrim. I just don't know why players do it. Listen, if you've made it to this point in the video, grats my dude. This is the end. I hope you found this video insightful. I have to ask you guys, what do you think about add-ons? Do you think they're useful? Why do you think people mod games in the first place? I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments below. As ever, if you liked the video, hit the like button, share this with a friend, and subscribe for more content. My name is Creeley. Have a safe journey.